All right, so welcome to week 4 of your weight loss education course. This week, we're going to continue the various factors that can be related to your weight set point going up, and it's all about yo-yo dieting today. So when we hear the term yo-yo dieting, it is a term that's used in modern day society, and a lot of doctors do it. We know it. It's term that we use to describe weight cycling. So if you're interested in looking at any research papers or more concrete information versus Google searching and showing up with Shape Magazine and all that kind of stuff, you might want to type in weight cycling. Different information will be available, different research studies that I've actually put in your PDF as well that you can read upon, because knowledge is power. And really what yo-yo dieting means is that we gain weight unintentionally. Then we don't like what we see on the scale or how our body feels or how our clothes are feeling. So we restrict our food. And then that becomes unattainable. We get frustrated. Maybe we get irritable. We have symptoms that are not pleasant. So we fall off the wagon, regain that weight once again. And then that continues to happen again and again and again. And that cycle doesn't break, but it can. And hopefully by the end of this, I will kind of open up your mindset to a new way of dieting or having a nutrition plan for life. So I want to talk about the fad diet secret. And the fad diet secret is, well, they have huge promises they can't keep. And their big promises, their big headlines are not designed for lasting change. So they could say, lose 20 pounds in 8 weeks. Well, you're going to put it all back on and within 6 months. They're not going to say that in the disclaimer, right? So we need to be very careful of what we read and what their promises are making. And is it a short-term promise or a long-term promise? Big difference. And research shows that 80% of women who lose a significant amount of weight, and that's defined as at least 10% of their starting body weight, will regain it within a year. That is scary, those stats. And it seems pretty logical in the same point where we use diets that are unsustainable. No wonder why we're going to put that weight back on. Now, it's not to say that you can't take that weight off, which is 10% of your body weight, and maintain it in a sustainable way. That can happen. But unfortunately, 80% of us want, or 80% of the people that do this, they want that instant gratification approach attached to these fad diets with these headlines because it's triggering our emotions to say, yes, like this is what I need, but it's not sustainable. And I want to leave this thing too, because I was doing some research on fad diets and what it can do to overall health. And what it showed with fad diets and restricting our food, we're not getting enough oxygen or blood supply that to pump around our body. And this can be for somebody that's overweight or even somebody that is thin. And what happens is there's not enough blood supply and oxygen going to the brain. There's not enough blood flow. And what happens with this is that it can increase our risk of Alzheimer's and dementia by 50% when we hit the age of 85. Fad diets aren't into play, but they do restrict blood flow for a lot of different people for a lot of various reasons. And because of that, we are increasing our chance to have brain malfunctions and issues later on in life. So I hope that hits home with you, because the last thing I ever want you to have, or the worst thing, would be able to lose our memory or to not have all the beautiful things that we're able to do because we decided to go down a fad diet secret and also had some other genetic and other factors that increase the likelihood of us having some of those ailments. So please, let's take a sustainable approach. Sorry, rant over. When it comes to yo-yo dieting and mental health, now there's a lot of studies that have found that weight cycling women were 50% more likely to suffer from depressive symptoms. And that makes sense. That makes sense that this constant, hope feeling that, yes, this is going to happen this time, and then it doesn't happen again. And this is a continually perpetuating cycle that can lead to depressive symptoms. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer that researchers were unable to determine if these struggles led to that weight gain, if it was the depression, or if the stress of dieting was the thing that caused the depressive symptoms. Now, it's a lot of different research that has to go through that. There's a lot of confounding variables that won't deliver the validity and reliability that we're after. So they can't completely disclose that information, but we can see that there are similarities there in some manner. I love this quote: "You didn't fail the diet failed you." I believe that wholeheartedly, because what we're dealing with when it comes to diets and losing weight is we're going through a biological change. It has to do with biology when we talked about menopause and pregnancy already, right? So it is biology. There's hormones that are in play. And biology is such a strong mechanism. And really, no amount of willpower or diet plan will let you overcome what the body is programmed to do. That is why 80% of diets fail, because that program is not tailored to your biology. That biology component has to contribute sleep, mindset, physiology. There's so many things going on in the body, and just a simple diet, reading a book is not going to do it. And as soon as we restrict too much of a limiting too much or restricting macronutrients, sorry, so it could be carbohydrate, fat, or protein, or we drop our calories too much, the body will rebel. It'll be like, no, I'm not doing this. And we will slow down the metabolism, just like that scale that we looked at the first week. And this will increase our set point. If we're not getting the food in, that makes sense. Our body is in this, whoa, what's going on? I'm in this starvation mode. I'm going to hold everything. Metabolism isn't going to rev up because it's not getting enough. Weight set point will shift up because it can't continue to rev. And if we don't lose as quickly as we would like, right? We kind of get very frustrated. We're likely to gain weight, and this is going to continue long term. So I wanted to go through the set point connection. So remember the other chart that we had the first week, I kind of designed a different one. And this is the ebbs and flows of a yo-yo diet. And when this happens and we start to go into a starvation mode, our hunger will increase and our metabolism will decrease. That makes sense. And this will sabotage our ability to stick to our diet and exercise program, because that mechanism, that biology mechanism saying, hey, I need you to eat, I'm starving, and metabolism will slow down because it's saying I'm not getting enough food, and that brain and that body is not listening to my needs. And this is kind of what starts that process. So when we don't have enough food, we can't stick to it, we will resume our normal eating patterns, so just like before, but our metabolism will continue to be slow, and we're going to rapidly gain the weight. And you could gain all the weight or a little bit, but every time you do this, more and more weight will go on. It doesn't work that, we restrict our diet for a few weeks, metabolism slows down, and then when we want to eat a bit more food because we think we can't do this, that the metabolism is going to rise up. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So when you think about that, this constant up and down mechanism is slowing the metabolism down more and more, which is shifting that set point higher and higher. And it might make sense to you as to why when you started dieting, you could lose more, and each and every time you go through that cycle, you lose less, and that set point comes higher. And the yo-yo dieting often results in net weight gain as your body gradually shifts more toward a fat storage mode. That's what happens. Each time we go through that cycle, our body will want to store more and more fat. And because it's so scared of that infrequent random times where you impose starvation, if we're consistent and not going to the extremes, our body will respond in a helpful manner because it's not in that fight or flight mode. Now, this little chart I find really helpful, right? So maybe at the top here, if you can see my arrow screen, this is where we're not happy. We're not happy with the scale. We don't like the number. So we want to do some rapid weight loss. We want to cut our, food down quite a bit. But what happens here is, yes, we do get some weight loss, but our basal metabolic rate drops down. Our fatigue and decrease in activity will drop because we're so tired. Food cravings start to rise. And then we say, can't do it. So we return to former eating habits right here. We cannot do this. But our set point has been raised. Our metabolic system is low. Just because we start eating, once again, it doesn't mean that our metabolism is going to go high. It's a process. So we get rapid weight gain. Then we start to feel guilt and shame. Then we have this new determination, I'm going to diet again, and it goes again and again and again. This is another way to look at it, a different type of mechanism depending on what your visual likes to be. So we start to diet, we decrease our calories. Then we get this famine starvation approach and response, right? What happens is we lose weight. We lose weight from muscle and fat. That's what happens. We reduce our metabolic rate, and we actually increase our fat storage. This will happen in a famine. If we reduce our calories too much, we actually put on weight. We put on fat stores. sorry, you lose weight, but you put on fat stores. And what happens here is that skinny fat look, right? If you can kind of remember that, wow, yeah, I lost a lot of weight at some point, or I know somebody that's done that, but they looked kind of skinny fat. They were kind of, a little bit thicker around the stomach region, or they just couldn't lose that last little bit in their stomach. That's a fat storage. And we know from hormones that that is where we tend to store. So obviously we can't do this. We increase our calories and then we're in that feast response. We want more. We're still in that reduced metabolic rate. We do have a loss of muscle here and we're going to regain more weight from fat. And this continually repeats itself. And each time you go through the cycle, just like I said, the set point will come higher and higher. And if you can kind of look at that bottom here, there wasn't any point where the fat storage kind of stopped increasing, or where it actually stated here, yes, the weight set point is kind of stable. So metabolic rate is a very important component in dieting. And oftentimes we're not kind of giving that the care and that it needs. So I wanted to add this in here because it's very fascinating. And I wrote a little bit more in the PDF about yo-yo dieting and the TV show, The Biggest Loser. And if you type into Google before, after, and now, you'll actually see a lot of them, either put on all the weight and more, or had to put on a little bit of the weight that they had lost. And studies show that their metabolism slowed down exponentially. They had a ton of weight. It makes sense that their metabolism would slow down because of the weight they had to lose. But even when they started to get back home, maybe increase a little bit more of the foods and exercises, they continued to have a slower metabolism, even when they were eating healthier foods. And that's a big shock to the system. So, why was the biggest reason for some of those people for putting the weight back on? It's unsustainable. And the biggest one that they read about was exercise component. That if you ever watch that TV show, they were on a very low caloric diet that could be unsustainable and a factor on its own. But a lot of it was exercise related. That they were at a treatment center for a couple months. They would work out 5 to 6 hours a day. They didn't have their regular responsibilities. Most of the food was already cooked for them. They had to work out. And that's a great mechanism to kickstart things, but how are they supposed to keep that 5, 6 hours of exercise per day when they got home into their normal life of taking care of their kids, going to work? It is unsustainable. And that's what they showed as to why a lot of those people increased their weight, and their set point started to rise because they couldn't do the exercise. And then they saw the scale either go up, not budge, they get devastated, start to eat, and they get into that cycle again. So I really hope that kind of hits home when you watch those, The Biggest Loser. I absolutely always loved watching it. And now sitting back, I look and say, wow, that's a very scary thing to be in because it is unsustainable what they are doing. So, how can we avoid yo yo dieting? There are a few ones. One would be cut the restriction, stop restricting your food to an extreme level. I need you to watch out for any diet that restricts an entire food group or forces you to cut out everything that you love. Now, there will be times where you might have to cut out a food group because of dietary needs. Maybe you have like gluten, lactose, you might have some issues, but there are other foods that we can replace in that. So we don't have to take out a complete food group. And it's these unrealistic plans that cause the weight cycle to continue. And I want you to remember that calorie restriction can threaten your ability to lose weight in the future because that set point continues to go up. And reflect on that and say, yeah, you know what? Am I struggling more because of what I had done in the past of restricting calories? And do I want to continue this cycle going forward? I want you to ditch the calorie counting methodology and focus on eating fiber rich plant foods that we talked about, which fill you up and leave you feeling truly satisfied. If we can get rid of the apps, most people know I'm not a big fan of them, but hey, if it helps you track, that's great. But we don't want to be so meticulous on that calorie numbers that we lose out on a lot of other things because we're just focused, did I get my calories in for that day? Another tip is to look beyond the scale. Now, I don't want you to let the scale to be the only measurement of your success, right? Some things that matter are blood lab normal, right? When we talked about hormones, are you sleeping okay? Exercising appropriately? These are all factors that we need to contribute beyond just the scale. So I like to use pictures with some clients, mood trackers, energy trackers, maybe feedback from friends or family, body measurements. These are all helpful to know, are we on the right process? And we need to remember that daily fluctuations with our weight will occur. That happens. It will. It's impossible for it to go for steady decline. It does not work that way. And a great way to look at this in a year is to take your weight, if you wanted to do that, every week and plot it on a graph, like literally a piece of paper. There are apps that do it, but you pop it on a graph. And what you'll see is that, oddly enough, out of a year, there'll be some points that don't make sense. They're outliers. You're like, why are they don't fit the line? That was just an odd week. And we would erase that from any research purposes. And I want you to take that account too, is looking at the end of your week. Is this an outlier week? What factors were involved as to why the scale went up? What can I do this week to improve? And in doing so, we will make sure those outliers remain outliers and don't become the new norm. And I want you to also understand your body weight is a representation of your eating habits over years and decades. It's not a week, it's not a month. Your body and your weight is a representation of the habits you have created over years and decades, which means that we have many years and many decades to continue making progress and in a healthy manner. I want you to also to implement steps. So create small goals and give yourself credit where credit is deserved. So we want to use our CBT fitness tool, the credit list from the week before. Give yourself credit for the things that you're doing well. And I want you to schedule and plan out your food and training with flexibility in mind. We don't want to be too restricted and not be able to buffer stuff that happens in our day to day. We want to make sure that we can schedule these in so that, we're not going to go into a very restrictive reactive mode. And I also want you to consider your headspace. So we need to address relationships with food. And if you have any fears around certain foods, you really need to address that if you want to move forward. Is there a potential for disordered eating? Disordered eating is vastly different than anorexia and bulimia and some of the diagnostic DSM-5s. So we can have disordered eating, body image issues. We can have, a lot of fears around food, around the scale. That doesn't mean that it's eating disorder, but we can have disordered eating habits that need to be addressed. And if you're feeling that, yeah, you know what, I do need some more help, I definitely suggest talking to your doctor about getting a referral to a therapist that specializes in disordered eating if needed. And then soon I will be fully registered in order to help you as well. But definitely talk out to your doctor. And lastly, credit time. So we've finished our fourth week of the weight loss education course, and I want you to take some time this week to take the yo-yo dieting quiz. This is going to help you determine if you fit into the yo-yo dieting cycle and how we can then better reflect moving forward. I want you to reflect on your history of yo-yo dieting. It's important to see where it began. What were the short-term benefits? What were the long-term benefits? Do you want to make a change? What are the first steps? These are some of the questions that we want to do. I want you to sign the sustainable eating contract. It's also the yo-yo dieting contract, that you will never fall into this trap again. You're smarter than that. And I also want you to continue to monitor your highly processed food intake and making sure that that is something that is going to continue throughout the entire course and many years to come. So enjoy reading that PDF, fill out that worksheet, and I'll see you next week, where we're going to be going into some genetic factors as to why your weight set point might be going up.